Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. If you would like to support this channel, please hit the like button and consider subscribing if you enjoy the content. And now, let's start with the first story. It's called Hot Enough. I used to be a chef in a Mexican restaurant in a small town in Australia nearly 40 years ago. We were modestly popular and I loved working there. One night, a young man came in to dine with a young lady. It was very obviously a first date. They ordered nachos to share with a side of jalapenos for their entree. He ordered a steak Veracruz, hot, for his main. The young lady ordered a chicken burrito, mild, for hers. I, as I usually did throughout the night, would walk around the tables and ask if people were enjoying the food. After the nachos, I checked on them, and the young man informed me that the chili that accompanied the nachos was not hot at all and that he loved hot food. I was informed that he had traveled extensively and had eaten some of the hottest food in the world and that no one had ever made a dish too hot for him. He reiterated that he wanted his steak main extra hot. To be honest, I found him to be pompous and rather obnoxious in the way he was speaking down to me and found myself taking a disliking to him. I will add at this point that the young lady was looking a little uncomfortable and I got the impression her date was not going as she had expected. I headed to the kitchen. I made her a lovely chicken burrito while putting together his steak. He wanted it hot. He was going to get it. Our steak Veracruz was usually a steak cooked and topped with our house tomato sauce base with some bell peppers and onions with a touch of chili. On this occasion, I set to work. Keep in mind this was Australia back in the 80s and we did not get a lot of different chilies back then. I had a few bird-eye chilies in the kitchen that were mainly there for the staff and the resident Mexican guitarist meals, so I started with those. I finally diced about 10 of those with their seeds. I then started sweating off my onions and capsicums. I then threw in the chilies and then I added about a tablespoon of chili powder and about a tablespoon of cayenne. I soon felt the fumes hit my nose and the back of my throat and my eyes started watering. I ran to the door of the kitchen to get a breath of air, as the air in my tiny kitchen was rapidly becoming unbreathable. I went back to my pan and put a ladle of the house tomato sauce in. I then let that simmer for a few minutes. I then added some chopped up jalapenos from a jar in my fridge and thought, why not? And then went a bit more chili powder. I then put the flash fried steak in to finish it off in the sauce. I served it all up on a plate with some rice, served up the chicken burrito and hit the bell for the waitress to serve it to the table. The waitress came back and told me that as she placed it in front of him, he said, "This better be hot." She assured him the chef had done as requested. I went to the door of the kitchen, joined by my waitress, to watch the show unfold. And unfold it did. I watched with glee as he sliced the steak, took a piece on his fork, and with a smug look on his face, he put it in his mouth. He took a chew and then realized his mistake. I saw it. That moment when his face changed, but he was trying so hard not to show it. He couldn't. He was on a date and he had worked so hard and now he had to go through with it. He ate the steak. I could see every ounce of pain on his face. He struggled. He struggled hard. His date watched him with a slight smile on her lips and I got the impression that she was thoroughly enjoying his pain. He went through several jugs of water. He sweated. He barely spoke. At the end of the meal, I came out of the kitchen and asked him if he had enjoyed his meal. His words? Could have been hotter. He never came back. His date? She became a regular and told us he was an insufferable fool and she never saw him again. I have no regrets other than I wish Carolina Reapers had been around then. The next story is called Permission to Leave. I teach at a public school. Occasionally, in the hallway I teach in, there's an overwhelming sewage smell. Normally it's an inconvenience, but not so drastic we have to move rooms. Yesterday was the worst I've ever experienced since I started teaching at the school. Teachers immediately tried to move their classrooms, get out of the hallway, etc. One class moved into the principal's conference room, and from the gist of it, our principal was livid that her space was invaded. We received an email stating that we are not to move our classes without notifying our supervisor. That seems logical. However, the email went on to say that we are not allowed to leave our room to stroll. visit another classroom, etc., without speaking to our supervisor or the front office. I was absolutely fired up when I read this email. I wanted to make her regret sending it as quickly as possible. I notified everyone in my hallway that they should be calling the office every time they needed to use the bathroom. I encouraged as many teachers as possible to constantly be calling to notify them of their movement around campus. Within 2 hours, I had called the front office 4 times. Once even just to let them know I was walking down to the front office. Most of the teachers in my building called a couple of times. Once, when the main receptionist was on lunch and another support staff was covering for her, I called to let them know I was going to the bathroom. The woman on the other end sounded so confused. "Do you need something?" she awkwardly asked. I explained it was that per the email it was expected for us to notify the office of our bathroom breaks. She chuckled and told me to have a good time. Within 3 hours we received another staff-write email explaining, "Okay, some clarification. We should not call the office if we need to go to the bathroom, ever stroll on campus or visit another teacher's classroom." I walked down to the office later that day with the biggest grin on my face, and every support staff knew exactly why I was so happy. We all had a good laugh. One of the support staff said to me that the principal said, "I didn't mean it literally." The last story is called Time Card. A few years ago, I was employed by a relatively small but publicly traded company. Well, this place went public and decided to use some of the money to purchase an even smaller company, and suddenly we were in the DoD contracting business. The US Department of Defense places restrictions on private sector contractors about how much profit they are allowed to make, among other cost-controlling mechanisms. One such mechanism is that anyone working on DoD contracts has to charge their time to specific project codes. This way they can compare your actual cost to the cost you estimated when you were awarded the contract. Well, our genius company decided that instead of only having the personnel working on these projects, they would make every single salary person sign a time card every week, which was no more than 50 people out of over 1,000. For over 95% of us, we charged 100% of our labor to the commercial side of the business, which was one project code, non-defense overhead or something like that. Most people just charged 8 hours per day, regardless of how many hours they actually worked, because no one tracks their time down to the minute. Shortly after this happened, new state legislation went into effect, requiring that all employers provide 1 hour of sick leave per 40 hours worked. Nobody paid much attention to it, but I did, because I was in a fairly specialized engineering role, with only 2 of us at the whole company. I trained the other guy, who also happened to live overseas to support another site. I started charging my actual hours. I noticed that despite how many hours I charged, the amount of PTO I was accruing stayed the same. This happened 3 or 4 paychecks in a row, and then I approached HR. They looked at me like I had 2 heads when I informed them they were not adjusting my PTO accruals based on hours worked, but your salary. You are paid for 40 hours, regardless of how many hours you work, they told me. I explained how that didn't really apply to the situation due to the new legislation. They again looked at me like I was completely crazy. They said they'd get back to me with an answer in a week or 2. Fast forward 2 months. I'm still diligently filling out my time cards like a good little drone, and I've spoken with several of my work buddies who started doing the same. The thing about this particular group of folks was that we all traveled internationally, oftentimes last minute, on a regular basis for work. Well, wouldn't you know it, it turns out that travel time, per our state labor laws, is considered working time. 16 hours worth of flights, all working time. And while you are there, you are not exactly relaxing. It's long days, handling customer concerns, multiple days in a row. A perfect storm of circumstances happened that fall, where we were all traveling around the same time, and we all booked 120+ hour weeks of work. We all eagerly awaited our pay stubs to see all that extra PTO accrued. And nope. We approached HR again. They told us they would escalate the issue to their attorney. We went back to work. Well, not surprisingly, things started going downhill for all of us. We started moaning about things a bit, and we all ended up quietly looking for jobs. Within a 5-week period, all of us put in our notices, and I lost my patience. I wrote an email to HR detailing our contacts with them, and I informed them that I would be escalating to the labor board without a full accounting of all back-owed PTO that would need to be paid. I got a panicked phone call within about 5 minutes. Why are you even recording your hours that way? your salary, because we have to fill out time cards. Why don't you just put in 8 hours per day like everyone else? I'm sorry, but it sounds like you are asking me to falsify my time card. When I sign it, the time card specifically asks me whether I've reported my time accurately, under threat of prosecution. No, I'm just... Why haven't you brought up this issue previously? I have. Twice. With you. I detailed those encounters in the email I just sent. I'm sure the company's attorney has informed you of your requirements by now. They haven't gotten back to me. I was grinning now, right across my face. Well, funny enough, I went ahead and emailed our general counsel. It turns out my email was the first they've heard about the concern. I've put in my notice. I expect to be paid in full for all back-owed PTO, or I'll be filing a report with L&I, who take accusations of rape theft fairly seriously. I believe they give you a week to remit payment or pay up to triple what's owed. The HR drone was silent. Please contact me via email only when you have decided on a path forward. And with that, I hung up. It turns out that not only did I get paid the full PTO I thought I was owed, there was a bit extra on there as well. And one of my buddies went ahead and reported the company to the labor board anyway, which apparently caused quite a stir. Last I heard, the HR department, with the exception of a couple of recruiters, got completely turned over, all the way up to the vice president. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and want to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.